Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Steve Gregorian. I'm the president and CEO of the Detroit Economic Club. Welcome to today's special meeting, and I especially want to welcome our DEC members. If you're not a DEC member yet, please allow me 10 seconds to myth bust. There's no nomination process, no application process, and no job level requirement for becoming a DEC member. We're simply looking for people that want to build their networks and also learn from thought leaders like the ones on stage today. So we would just ask you, if you're interested, join at econclub.org. So we don't disturb the program, kindly silence your cell phones as we get started. And one of the many traditions of DEC meetings is we always begin by honoring our great country with the Pledge of Allegiance. I would ask you to stand and join me. The flag is to my right. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Kindly remain standing as our invocation today will be delivered by Deacon Joseph Adams from the Hartford Memorial Baptist Church.
Morning, Steve. Shall we pray? Almighty God, we ask your blessings on this meeting today and the information shared. Help us to understand there are evil forces working, trying to create a distrust in our families and this nation. A distrust that causes us to lose faith in you and in our democratic way of life, the rule of law. We realize that democracy is not perfect, but we know having faith in you and accepting your teachings that all men are created equal, we can live and work together in peace. We ask these blessings from you who have created us all. Amen.
Thank you, Deacon Adams, and please be seated, everybody. A quick but important thank you to Detroit Public Television for partnering with us on today's webcast. And as many of you know, we love having high school and college students at every DEC meeting. Today was no exception. They're here courtesy of our generous corporate sponsors, and they had the privilege of spending 30 minutes with Mr. Khan before the lunch started. So let's just take a moment, and I want you to know who is with us today. Students from Melvindale High School, courtesy of General Motors Company. Students from University of Windsor, thanks to the Children's Foundation. Clarkston High School is here, thanks to Michigan Office Solutions. Sterling Heights High School, thanks UPS. Brother Rice High School Warriors, thanks to Greenleaf Trust. And 20 students from the AGB Manugian School. One group brought to you by AAM. The other group brought to you by Andy and Joe from Eckhart Industries. I always say it's a great meeting when we have 20 students plus one Armenian in the house. So how about a round of applause to thank all of our students and sponsors. Two quick things on your tables. You'll see our corporate sponsor partner brochure. Please patronize these businesses. We would not be here today if it wasn't for their generosity. So thank you to those folks who are part of our corporate sponsors and partners. Also on your tables is our season lineup. We hope you can be with us next Monday, November 25th. We're hosting Dinesh Paliwal, the CEO of Harman. If you're a fan of technology in the connected world, this guy's fascinating. We had him 3 years ago, and we hope you can join us next Monday. We'll be at the Motor City Casino Hotel for that. And then we'll kick off the new year, January 7th, with the 2020 Michigan Economic Outlook meeting featuring Diane Swant, Chief Economist from Grant Thornton, and Jeff Donofrio, who leads State of Michigan Labor and Economic Development efforts. So we hope you can mark your calendars for both of those. If you're a tweeter, we want you to tweet today using @DebtDesk. Economic Club. And of course, I love sharing DEC history with you. We've got an incredible history of speakers over our 85 years, and Mr. Khan, November 19th is a very popular date in our 85-year history. You, sir, now join a distinguished list of 15 other speakers who graced our podium on this day. A few quick highlights from this group. 1945, U.S. Naval Secretary James Forrestal. 1984, we had some fun when we were joined by Tom Brokaw, the NBC nightly news anchor. And just 1 year ago today, we had a lot of fun with Adam Silver, the NBA commissioner, and Dan Gilbert when they were together on stage. So today, Mr. Khan, we're pleased to add you as our 16th speaker on this day in DEC history. Congratulations, and thank you for being with us. We certainly want to hear from you. The last 15 minutes of the program is a chance for the audience to ask Mr. Khan some questions. There's instructions on your table. You can use your smartphone, and those questions will make their way to our presiding officer, who I'm about to put to work. Mayor Mike Duggan is, as everybody knows, the driving force at the helm of an amazing turnaround of our great city. We're also very proud he's a Detroit Economic Club board member. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mayor Mike Duggan.
Well, good afternoon and welcome to this beautiful building. I think the last time I was a presiding officer was with Jim Leland after the Tigers were in the World Series. But when Steve asked me, I get a chance to come and be here with one of my very favorite people in the world, Shahid Khan. And when you hear him speak, you'll know why. And he'll be interviewed by the great Detroit News columnist, Dan House. Let me just tell you briefly about Shahid Khan. Born in Pakistan. His father was a laborer in construction and other jobs. His mother was a math professor. He came to the United States at 16 years old and enrolled in the University of Illinois in engineering. There's another Illini here. But he didn't know where he was going to live, so he started at the YMCA at $2 a night. Needed to support himself, and so washed dishes at $1.20 an hour as he came to this country. He graduated with his engineering degree, went to work for a company that made bumpers, a company called Flexingate. And he worked there for a while, and then he thought, I can handle this bumper thing. And he started his own company, customizing bumpers. 10 years after the day he started at Flexingate, he went back and bought the company from his former boss. And that small bumper company today is one of the largest auto suppliers in the world, makes front ends, headlamps, grills, a whole range of parts. $8 billion a year, 66 plants, 9 companies, 24,000 employees. And he has interests far more diverse. He's the owner of the Jacksonville Jaguars football team, the Fulham FC soccer team in the British Premier League, and he's just started the all-elite wrestling network to take on WWE. That's what he's doing in his spare time. But there was one thing in 2016 he hadn't done. He hadn't started a facility in the place where the auto industry was basically invented, in the city of Detroit. And so, thanks to Bill Ford, who was about to start the plans to build the new Ford Ranger out at the Ford Wayne Assembly Plant, and Shahid Khan was going to make most of the body parts, he had to build a new supplier plant. And Bill asked him to talk to me first. And first time I met Shahid, he said, I'm here because Bill Ford said I had to talk to you first. They can't build the cars if the body isn't there. You got 30 days. And I said, we can get this done in 30 days. Only one thing, I want your team to come over and sit with the neighbors and talk to them about the plant. And he said, you want what? And I said, yeah, that's how we did it. This is before the Community Benefits Ordinance was formalized. And so we had this space on I-94 in the industrial park. His team came over and sat with the neighbors. And they said, we want to make sure the trucks don't go through our neighborhood. We want first shot at jobs. The Flexingate team was so great. The neighbors came together to city council and argued for the new plant in their neighborhood. He built a 500,000 square foot, $160 million plant, and when he posted the 500 jobs to hire, 16,000 people showed up. And that changed everything. It changed the perception of Detroit as far as a place where people want to work. What he did is Shahid Khan went around the country talking about the fact Detroit's getting real quality workers. It helped persuade Bill Ford to bring 5,000 people down in the train station. It ultimately led to FCA very seriously considering the 5,000 employee assembly plant for the Grand Cherokee that's now being built on the east side because they saw what happened. And so I want at this point to introduce a great world business leader, a great American business leader, but a man absolutely essential to the resurgence of manufacturing in the city of Detroit. Let's give a warm welcome to Shahid Khan.
Thanks, Mayor. And thank you, everybody, for being here. So, I want to share some thoughts with you, and then I hope I'm not going to offend anybody, okay? So, but I think, to add value, I think you need the unvarnished facts, and hopefully, you'll get something out of it. But it's a privilege to be here, and, I've worked in American factories for 50 years, and I've seen a lot of change. Probably the most devastating change that I've seen is the loss of our middle-class jobs, and really the impact it had on human lives. And I'm talking about really the hollowing out of the mill towns in central Illinois, Ohio, and all the areas where, I used to travel. So, and obviously the inner cities, whether it's Detroit where everything started and some of the other ones, the devastation there was really quite amazing. Now, what caused this? I think there's a lot of discussion on it, the changing consumer taste, inept management, the uncooperative unions, global competition, and absolutely no government industrial policy. So it's been talked about a lot, but really very little or nothing's been done about how to really recapture our middle-class jobs. It's debated, but very little action. So about 4 years ago, I was talking to our great customer and, my friend Bill Ford about expansion. And Bill said, good companies make a profit, great ones do good and make a profit. And creating jobs and recreating the industrial base in inner city Detroit was very important to him. It was a priority, and he said, I think you ought to go talk to Mayor Duggan. And I said, okay, I'll do that. And obviously I was expecting, to hear the usual stuff, and then I could tell Bill, I did my part and I could go do my own stuff. Really, I got to tell you, I wasn't going to mention it, but I think it's important. What the mayor is doing for the city, I think, is an inspiration. And really, if somebody said what brought Detroit back, I'd say Mayor Duggan. I mean, there's just absolutely. It would have been a lot cheaper for me. He wasn't in office, what transpired. But it wouldn't be really the feeling and the of accomplishment I've had, obviously, is thanks to him. But last year we launched our state-of-the-art factory. I think it was really important. I knew it was really going to be hard, but it's absolutely been amazing that we've got over 600 employees and really their families, how they've changed in a good way. So I think, before we start the discussion, and I invite Daniel to come over here, I think there are 2 points I'd like to mention. One, I knew this was going to be hard. I had seen, I mean, this was not an original idea, it had been tried and a lot of people had failed. And what it really needed was absolutely state-of-the-art investment in infrastructure, latest machinery, and then training people who hadn't worked to really manage and run a facility that would be globally competitive. That was hard, but it's been a lot harder, a lot more challenges than I imagined, but it's been more satisfying than I could have also imagined. And secondly, this is the time you say, you know, I'm glad I'm not working for somebody else, or really responsive to public markets, because I definitely would have been fired. I spent a lot more than we started out with, really projecting. It's definitely a long-term play, but I felt it's very important because middle class is the heartbeat of America. So with that, let me invite Daniel, if you'd come up, and then I think, you know, we can kind of make sure we find out what's on your mind later and, you know, address that. So, thank you.
Well, thank you. A lot to talk to you about. Middle class, Detroit, why you invest in Detroit. Besides Mayor Duggan, obviously is a reason you've just articulated why you're bullish about Detroit. What else makes you bullish about Detroit?
I love the energy of Detroit, and I mean, first time I came to Detroit was 1971. It was really a very different age, and I remember coming to Metro Airport, and then I would get on and I would see the billboards. They'd always kind of energized me because I knew if I saw a competitor on the billboard, that guy was going broke, okay? They had the priorities right or wrong. And what were they making? And maybe I ought to be making that. So right when I'd come off the airport, I mean, it absolutely pumped me up. And then coming to the city, even though it's gone through the ups and downs, there's a vibrancy, there's a mojo about Detroit I love. And one of the most unpopular thing I did in Jacksonville was people asked me about, you know, they've got everything going for them, and why it's not happening. And I'd tell them, a homeless guy in Detroit's got more mojo than a millionaire in Jacksonville, okay? That was not very popular. But
Can't imagine why.
well, you know, so I had to learn PR, but that's how I felt about it.
What do you think, you've been coming here since 1971, what has changed to make Detroit cool again? I mean, there's been, the mayor talked about the investment here, huge global companies reinvesting in the city when we thought that they had left, frankly, for good.
Well, I think, you know, Detroit went through what Chicago's going through, that you can tax your way out of poverty and decline. So I think what happened here is, you know, it drove out the difference makers and the companies that generate wealth. And with that, you know, when the decline started, I think you got to hit rock bottom, and then you need somebody like the mayor who has been able to really make a difference. And some corporate citizens like Ford Motor Company who you know, said, hey, this is important to us to see something happen there.
Do you think we've reached a point as an outside investor where this is a sustainable ecosystem, or is it still kind of riding a wave that could easily dissipate?
I think there's a big obstacle in Detroit that I found, and that's construction costs. Okay, so for us, this was one-time thing, and then you know, I've talked to people on, hey, how come there isn't more stuff going on downtown Detroit, and also all the other stuff, and you know, we experienced it firsthand, but cost of construction in Detroit is among the highest in the country. Really? Absolutely. It's more than Midtown Manhattan and double what it is in Chicago. So
how do you explain that? Your people had to have looked at that and tried to explain it to you.
Well, no, we didn't quite frankly know that, okay? That's why I'm not working with somebody and I didn't get fired, okay? So it's like, you know, I would say there is demand but supply, and I think it's there's no other way of putting it. It's union costs. And it will have to change. The city went through a hard time. GM, Chrysler, the auto industry went through. I mean, the costs that are baked in, I think they don't get those competitive, you're not going to have the investment.
Right. You know, there are some other suppliers in this room who have invested in Detroit, and one of the things I've heard from them over the years is that it's more difficult to get employees who are qualified to work in these jobs, not to get the people who apply, but to get to the people you want to hire. Is that something that you have encountered as well?
I think it's spot on, okay? But I think once, we had, a customer, Bill Ford, who wanted it done. We had the mayor who, every objection I came up with, he somehow was able to, whether it was timing or whatever, make it happen. Then we were committed, okay? So we spent a lot more, and failure was not an option. We did things like to really plan, which are expensive and all very difficult to do. For example, we're a big employer in Windsor. We got great people there. Technical skills, skilled trades, they had to come in and help. We had identical presses in Battle Creek, Alabama, in Windsor that we can run tools on because you can hire the people, they don't have the skill. And it's not just, so you had to supplement that. But beyond that, we wanted to hire people who maybe, had a criminal record, who hadn't worked before for years. All of that pooled through the funnel, you bring them down. They don't have the skills to, hey, look, the customer is going to be working on a Sunday. We have to work on a Sunday. So the absentee, you've got to develop that. But it's spot on that, those are skills. That's why it's going to take time. That's why it's hard. If it was easy, somebody would have done it.
Is there any other city or region that you can think of that's seeing more automotive manufacturing investment right now than Detroit?
I think in the South, there is a lot of investment.
But it's not concentrated in the same geographic area, though, is it?
No, it is more regional, dedicated to a customer.
Right.
Okay. But I think, Detroit is, the epicenter. And that's why it's got everything going for it, and it's going to take people who are committed. You want to make a profit, but you want to do good. So it's going to take more than just putting the money down. It's like, in our case, we've got 60 other factories with people with money who have supported it to get it up. But I think the key point is, once it's up, it has the best infrastructure on the planet. The people who are there have the backing to really keep it now successful moving forward. So, these are 600 plus families whose lives have been changed for the good forever, and now we can build on it.
You talk about the decline of the middle class, and that people talk about trying to fix it, but nobody does anything about it. You said it at the table as well. What would be the kinds of things that politicians or business leaders could do to start to change that trend?
I think it takes a special kind of a leader or politician, And I think, again, I don't want to be repetitive, but Mayor Duggan is, is absolutely, the epitome of that, which is you want to do the right thing, you want to be able to see all sides, and you want a strong arm and use every influencer to make it happen.
We're here in the cradle of the middle class and the creation of it. How has the social contract changed, and in what ways, and how do you think that can be repaired?
Well, I think the social, one thing which is really not talked about, it came up with the student section, is education. I think if you were saying one threat to middle class besides job disappearing, and the jobs we're talking about, you don't need a college degree, but like for me, what I was able to do, you can't do today, which is put yourself through college, go to engineering school by working. Today, you're coming out of college with, unless you have rich parents. If you're lucky enough to have them, that's great. But for most people like me, you wouldn't be able to do that. So the whole college systems needs to be re-engineered. It's totally gone off the track where billions of dollars come into a university like a land-grant university, and it really feeds the egos of the professors, the administrators, to get the college rankings up, do all that, whereas the money ought to be going to paying the professors and heat for the buildings. So, all the money should be going for education. If the professors, the research scientists, all the ranking stuff, they can go get the money and perpetuate their own myth, their own ego, so they can go to the conferences, write the papers, let them do it. That is probably the biggest threat to the middle class, that education which is unattainable to most people unless you have rich parents.
Well, here in Michigan, we have some real problems with education. Educational attainment is typically very poor. Is that not as much an issue for the people who are in the middle class about understanding how important education is?
I think it is. I mean, obviously, it starts with the parents and the drive to get education, but if they don't have the means, then what do they do? Okay? I mean, I tell people this, like I'm listening to somebody, if they're doing, let's say a security guard or somebody, I tell them, you know what I would do? I'd be moving to Aspen, Colorado or Naples, Florida. You've got all these rich people paying taxes, they got great schools and very few students. You had a family, go over there, your kids are gonna get a great high school education. If you're able to, put your kids first and you don't have the means, that's really...
Yeah, except leaving Warren, Michigan and moving to Naples, Florida is not very easy financially. It's a lot more expensive, right?
No, I mean, once you get there, cost of living is very low in Naples, Florida for average person. You go a mile off the water, housing is probably just as inexpensive as, here. But, I mean, those are the creative thoughts you can look at on that's a good high school education.
Two-part question. You mentioned earlier industrial policy. What, if you were to design an industrial policy for the United States, what would it look like, number one? And number two, what countries, and you do operate in a lot of different countries, is there a country that you think is a model that could be applicable in the United States? Sometimes political cultures make certain things impossible to move from a Japan to a US, for example.
Well, I mean, the industrial policy ought to be, put America first. And no matter, I think, what's, you just, it's hard to, but ignore all the, social, immigration, religion stuff with our president now, but I think he's really hit on the trade aspect, which is you can't have other countries really be destroying our infrastructure. And that's really what's happened under this global competition aspect. And it's gone on. I mean, I've been in factories for 50 years. Nothing's been done till recently. Any country you go to, whether it's Korea, Japan, China, Germany, France, they buy a local product first. And I think one of the great gifts I think millennials are giving us is they care about where the coffee's coming from, where the food is coming from. And it might even be a little bit more, but they understand the connections. Okay, so when you buy a foreign product, it's much more than just buying a product. It's that why is manufacturing important? Because every job that's created, there's 4.5 other jobs, with the effect, the multiplier effect.
But how do you account for cost differentials? So, in North America, every region in the world that produces autos, for example, has a low-cost producing region. Whether it's Eastern Europe and Europe, it's Mexico and North America, it's China and Vietnam and Asia. I mean, how do you account for the increased costs if you pursue an America First, Invest in America strategy and remain competitive?
Well, I think tariffs is one aspect, okay, to give an initial advantage to the hometown team. I mean, look at all the foreign producers here. I mean, a lot of them are our customers, but they capture the value, whether it's back in Japan or Korea or Germany, okay, the innovation, the engineering, the R&D, etc. They have a tax structure that does that. They encourage it. It's part of the culture, okay? So outsourcing a lot of this stuff, which might come natural to us, it really, first of all, it hasn't worked. I mean, but it takes a while. By that time, you've kind of destroyed the infrastructure you had to. with that experiment.
Is there a country that you think should be studied that has some lessons for the United States in terms of industrial policy?
I think it is, I mean, we're the innovator. I mean, this is the cradle of innovation as America, so I think you want to study, but it isn't we're going to copy and paste what somebody else is doing. I think for us, it's, what's driven this country is immigration, growth, really not much respect for the status quo, having the opportunity for, people to come up.
Do you sense that there is what's the word, a renaissance in American manufacturing? I mean, it's remarkable to me how much investment we're seeing in the U.S. in old industrial cities like Detroit.
Yep, absolutely. And you know why? A key driver is the tax policy that was put into effect a couple of years ago on depreciation and what have you. Now, Germany, France, they've had that for a long time. That you can write the whole thing off. That is driving a lot of the investment.
Do you expect to see more?
Absolutely. I mean, I think, some of the policies that have been started, if they carry those out and focus on middle-class job creation, I think we'll see a lot more.
We talked about it at the table, but both parties, as we're going into 2020, are fixated on the middle class. I don't think there's any question that the road to the White House, again, is going to go through the industrial Midwest, Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, critical states.
And Florida.
And Florida. Everyone's talking about it, the middle class. Do you see from either party anything that is really moving in the right direction to address the overarching concern of the middle class?
Well, I think there's a lot of talk, but I think, President Trump, his policies on economics probably are the best thing right now going. Mm-hmm. Coupled with the taxation policy, which is on investment as well as individual taxes.
He also has made trade deals a cornerstone of his first term. Yet here we sit about a year away from the next election. We don't have a USMCA. We don't have a deal with China. He's still threatening potential tariffs on vehicles coming in from Europe and other foreign. And now he's in a very difficult political situation domestically. So do you think we get to an election where none of those things are basically done and in the can?
Yeah, but if you get to none of them are done, how are they hurting us? They're not, okay? Because at the very least, it's added uncertainty. And when you have uncertainty, even you have the foreign producers saying, we better invest here. Who knows what this crazy guy might do? And that is really helping us.
What do you hear in your travels around other countries about domestic politics, I mean, in the context of business and investment?
I think, that America is a great place to invest. I think there's no question about that, but we want to do it, but we don't want to hurt what we're doing in the home country.
Do you think, given your kind of your story of coming here at the age of 16 and really bootstrapping it, going and eventually buying the company that employed you out of school, makes you more bullish on the U.S. maybe than some people who were born, say, right here in Detroit and have been working in the auto industry most of their careers?
Yeah, I mean, the great thing about America is optimism. I mean, that is the basic tenet of the American dream, that no matter where you are, you have the power, you control your destiny to get where you're going. You cannot be an American by being a pessimist. I mean, I tell people that all the time. Mm-hmm. I say, oh God, you sound too French, or you sound... so,
and how does that go?
It doesn't go well, okay? So it's, it's like, you see somebody pulling up in a Rolls Royce, in London, and they say, oh, Jesus, that guy, he stole money from here, that's Arab chic, this or that. And I tell them, if that guy was driving through south side of Chicago, people would be saying, I'm going to be driving one of those in 2 years, okay? So it's like our whole image and our thinking is so different. It's so wonderful.
But do you sometimes sense with a lot of the chatter out there that a lot of people who grew up in this country have lost sight of that, and that is the possibility that of what you can achieve just with grit and a little bit of luck and a lot of hard work?
I agree with that 100%. And immigration, okay, and diversity and social acceptance. And I think one of the things that really disconcerting to me is, all this national rhetoric on religion and immigration and really the mess we're in. I think if you were saying there was one thing you can fix, national agenda, it wouldn't be a trade policy or anything, it would be immigration, legal and otherwise, because that's what's driven this country.
Let's talk about the NFL for a second.
Great.
You have been an owner for, by my reckon, about 7 years? Yeah. That's not right? What have you learned?
Here's what I've learned. I'll tell you this. You're 2-14 in the auto business, you're bankrupt. You're 2-14 in the NFL, you get a hard draft pick, you got an easier schedule, and a big check still shows up. So NFL is, kind of socialism, Soviet Union, always promised that never happened.
So what have you learned about building a winning franchise, and what are the challenges? What are the things the hard decisions you have to make? I mean, those of us on the outside, people on the outside, the fans, that's the coach. We got to get a new quarterback. We don't have a good enough defense. Whatever how do you see that as an owner who's probably learning a lot of the real nuances of the game? I would think.
Well, to me, I love football, obviously, living on a university campus, and then I was so disgusted with Illinois football at times, I said, you know what? I'm going to get my own football team, okay? And I found out it's just as hard, okay? And so, I was fascinated with NFL, and then, it wasn't the first time. Over years, it's like you don't pick the team, they pick you. Okay, so when the opportunity came here, so Jaguars is very different than an older established team, okay, which is don't have the history, don't have the traditions, still losing, and don't have the money, okay? So when I got there, it was like, I'm a fan, I can't evaluate players, so I'm gonna just divide football from business. I do know business, and the business there just sucks, okay? You can't sell tickets, there's no sponsorship, and then when you talk to them, they'd say, well, we haven't won. And it was like, we're not in the business of selling wins. We're in the business of giving a game day experience, and I hope we win, but that's not what we're doing. So breaking those things up, and first do no harm, and then really how do we improve the game day experience? And Jacksonville, the team, had been rumored to leave for LA for years. And it was like, okay, we're not leaving, okay. But we're gonna look for another solution to have a second leg, which turned out to be London, get some money there so we have less capacity to sell, and really relating how do we add value for our sponsors and how do we have a great game day experience. I mean, this is Florida. You've got to resize the stadium. You got to have more pools. We need more cheerleaders. And a great sunny cabana, whatever experience, and then hopefully you win the game. So it's you got to recreate that, and then once you get that done, you have money because it's basically an arms race. You need better indoor facilities, you have to pay coaches better, you need bigger, on and on it goes. And then you get into, the football side, that you have the best people, and then you've got to support them, and you've got to stick with them where they can show what they can do. Impetuousness is not a good thing in auto parts or football.
I was going to say, are you the kind of owner that wants to talk to the coach about what he's doing, or the general manager? And you get the impression that there are certainly some owners who are like that, who are very, I guess, meddlesome in some ways in the football side of the business.
Yeah, well, God bless him. I mean, I know my strengths, I know my weaknesses, and I don't want to set the football team back by, sharing too much.
I've read, I believe you've been very involved in kind of looking at the international side of the NFL and the expansion, and I think you schedule a London game every season, or have for the last 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
Explain why you play in London, and ultimately where this ends up, and internationally what some of the markets for a franchise could be.
Well, you've got to get into the NFL to really recognize what a powerful organization it is. And the impact it has is absolutely mind-boggling. I mean, the ratings, the influence, and the saturation here is really quite amazing. I mean, you can look at, 20 out of the top 20 television programs, all NFL games. So the influence is really remarkable. So when I looked at, well, what are we going to do to expand our base? We have no history, we have no tradition. The only place you want to go is maybe outside. That is a market that really has not been served, and it basically was circus coming to town. They would go there, and maybe we can go there, promote the game, have a connection with the city and the fans. And our major sponsors now are out of London because they see the value. And you go to Wembley where we play, I mean, we have 80,000 plus fans, price of tickets is much more, and basically all teams are represented. And it is such an amazing experience where 40% of the people come from outside Britain to the games. I figured it out that for them coming to the NFL is like, I'm gonna be American for a day, okay? The American politics and American life are two separate things. Outside the world, they're separated. The greatest things, maybe in the 20th century, they happen to a human being, doesn't matter where you are on the planet, are American, okay? Whether it's blue jeans, or whether it's rock and roll, or social media, the internet and what have you, or Disney for that matter. And an NFL ticket is just like that for a day, I'm gonna go experience the American dream.
But you don't see one of these, like a London or a Toronto, having an actual franchise located there?
Well, I think, that's way above my pay grade. But I think for us, from my personal experience, I see as it's been very effective for us. It's been very effective for Jacksonville to have the business connections we've made in both cities. Job creation in Jacksonville really has been quite remarkable. And for us, I mean, we want to have a presence. We want the league to allow us to continually play games there. And depending on what the future holds, we might play more than one game. But I think right now, I don't think the time is right for anything like that.
Shahid Khan, thank you. Mr. Mayor, have some questions?
All right, well, thank you, Daniel, for a great job. And now it's the audience's turn. And Shahid, the number one question of the audience isn't going to surprise you at all. There have been some signs of an economic slowdown. What's your perspective on this, and are you and the auto industry in general prepared for such an event?
I think you have to be prepared for that. And it's so the ability to flex, and we've got some customers there, so maybe it's not, so I've owned a business since '78 is when I went into business, so I do the math, 41 years. One thing we've never done is lose money, okay, as a company, because once you get on that path, so being able to flex, know what your cost structure is, be able to flex down so you can re-energize and fight the next day, I think is vital. If any company owner or isn't prepared for that, they deserve what's going to happen to them.
Okay, so, and so how do you see the auto industry going? Are we seeing a slowdown?
I think we're seeing a slowdown, yes. But the simple, we're seeing a slowdown, and I don't think it's the end of the world. I think it's far, far better to have slight tapering and really not doing the wrong thing, which is start cutting prices, which drives values of used cars and really destroys residual and creates all kinds of other things. So selling fewer vehicles at the right price is far better than what's happened historically.
So your short-term challenge may be the economy. Longer term, this question of automated vehicles and ride sharing, and are people going to buy fewer cars and share them? How do you think about that in your long-term planning?
I think electrification is real, but this autonomous driving and all that, I think certainly it's not for us. I think it's billions of dollars are going to be they're going to vanish in thin air. My lifetime, we're not going to see that, and we can spend all day talking about it. But it's going to change. It's like some of the urban areas, 40% of the people have never had a driver's license. And the other 40% have it, don't use it. Most of the urban areas, whether it's Toronto or Chicago, I mean, those are the numbers. So that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. You're going to have, different kind of cars, basically what we've had in the past. But we're a big country, a rural population. I think pickup trucks, SUVs, I think, that's our brick. I mean, that's the core of the business.
So you made a comment that struck people unusual, and you skipped past it. But your statement that when you came in and you saw companies advertising on billboards, you knew they were doing the wrong thing. Have you never advertised on billboards, and what was your thinking as you did
I've
that?
never spent 1 cent on advertising or marketing in my life.
Really?
Okay? So it's really an unnatural act that now you're part of the NFL, and so, that our business is obviously selling, and, the Super Bowl ads, I think, are going for over 5 million now, mostly sold out. So, but they're very smart people. They know how to, monetize that, but I've never done it. And so when I would see that, I would say, okay, that's a company that just doesn't get it. I better learn. And, and if we were not here in public forum, I could name them all for you, and every one of them went bankrupt, okay? So.
All right. The NBA in China recently had issues regarding comments an executive had at Hong Kong. And of course, you've had issues in the NFL, crossing over from sports to social issues. How should professional sports owners and management view their right to speak out and the rights of their players on issues that may be controversial?
Well, I think what a sports owner, sports player does in America as Americans is one thing. I think, it's your right, it's your privilege, and you have to speak up for what you believe in. That's what made America great, so, we've got to do that. Now, what your opinion is, you go to a sovereign country and you start tweeting or giving your opinion, that's something different. And I think you go to a different country, you have to respect the norms there.
You recently announced you'll be the majority investor in the nation's only 24-hour news network aimed at African American viewers. How did you get involved, and what excites you about that prospect?
Well, that process started about 10 years ago. In the U.S. Congress, J.C. Watt, he was there. Some of the cable companies wanted to merge, etc. So they spent, J.C. Watts, his partner, a bunch of other people, about 8 years trying to launch the channel. And they went through some money and really nothing happened. So a couple of years ago when, they contacted me and I kind of learned about it, it was very obvious that really they didn't have the right business plan. And it wasn't just about putting money in, it was about how do you turn it into a reality. And so I said, you know, I'm gonna, I don't want anything to do with the editorial content, but I think I do want to fund it, and I want it to be done right, and for it to become a reality. So, because I think it's absolutely unmet need for the African American, and frankly, I'm hoping after that, once they coalesce, it becomes kind of a bridge to other ethnic minorities like South Asians or Palestinians or whatever, where their viewpoint and you know, a typical thing would be whether Chicago, Detroit, you know, you have somebody shot, that becomes the national news. But for every one of those, there's 100 kids who are getting up in the morning, taking a bus to school, going through life. The role models and really what the psyche is to be successful has not been presented. So, so I'm gonna, you know, let somebody else do that.
That's definitely worth applause.
Yeah. So. Pardon me? Okay, Black News Channel. Yeah. So it's January 6th. The great thing is that, you know, it's going to launch. If you have Charter or Comcast or Dish, it's going to launch on that. And it was very important to me that they have the money to have great editorial content and really great product. Because if it looks like it's coming from, you know, Wayne's World basement, I mean, it doesn't matter what the content is, image, you don't get a second chance to make a first impression. So hopefully January 6th, you know, you'll tune in. 33 million African American households, and I think, you know, somebody said the next national election is going to go through middle class. I think it's also going to go through African American households. So it will be very relevant, and hopefully it's going to do some good in the national debate.
So you've explained getting into the African American news network as a whole in the media in this country, but you've gotten into another venture where it doesn't at least appear to me to be as much of a whole. You started the All Elite Wrestling Network. Now, are you really think you can take on WWE, and what brought you into wrestling?
Well, you know, this is like, as a parent, this is probably the only time I could admit I was dead wrong, okay? And my son was right. So he's been a wrestling fan, and he had this idea and to start it, and you know, I went through it. Well, let me tell you about business, blah, blah, blah. But really was his vision, obviously with his father stroking a few checks. And, but they have an event. It's the number 1, number 2 trending topic in the world. On Wednesday nights, TNT, I mean, it's the biggest show TNT's had in 5 years. It's beating head-to-head the other guys by at least 50% margin right now on the 7th show. So it's on prime time. For example, England, it's on free TV in a whole different space in a much better way. So, and it's, you know, Mike, this wasn't about the competition. This was about the way my son explained it to me was, hey, there used to be 10 million hardcore fans 20 years ago. This is where competition is good, by the way. They had no competition, and now the hardcore audience is down to 2 million. So, the best demographics really right now are AEW, because most of the audience is 18 to 49, which advertisers pay attention to. So it's really creativity, and I mean, they've created a different market. This is not head-to-head competition.
All right. Do you go to these events yourself?
You know, I've been to them, and I got to tell you, I've been kind of blown away. And the human stories you feel that it's like, you know, my dad used to take me, and now I'm taking my dad because I got tired of the old stuff. I want to see the new stuff, the more athletic, the new energy, and something fresh. So yes, I've been to them, really kind of enjoyed them. And my wife, who had never watched a show, is almost a hardcore freak now, you know. So.
All right, are you ready for a round of lightning round?
Oh, jeez, okay.
Quick answers to several questions that Steve and the team have come up with. Something on your bucket list.
Winning the Super Bowl. That's the easy one.
Yeah, there's a few of us in Detroit who share that.
Well, wouldn't that be great to have the Lions and the Jags? Oh my
Yeah,
God!
there you go.
Okay, I wouldn't even care who won that. Okay, so
All right, a person other than a family member you would like to have lunch with.
alive or dead? I think if they were dead, probably Leonardo da Vinci.
Okay.
Yeah.
One of your favorite songs.
Bob Seger. I can name most of his songs. It's Detroit, it's raw, it's music I grew up with, Fire Lake. Okay.
All right. Your favorite sports team when you first came to this country or growing up?
Well, obviously it was football, be Illinois and the Bears. I mean, the first football team first game I saw, I think, was the Bears and the Lions. Yeah, so, yeah, there we go. So, you know.
So the best sport that you played yourself?
Tennis. I think it was cricket is the big game over there, but really I was not very good. But I played high school tennis, and I've loved tennis. Yeah.
All right. The last book you read?
East India Company, the book that came out here a couple of months ago, and how capitalism, English capitalism, took over a country and kind of destroyed it. So a lot of lessons.
One of your favorite movies?
Ford versus Ferrari would be my next
All
one.
right.
I was one of the first ones in line, so, and obviously one of the few lucky people driving the Ford GT every day I'm in Florida. I mean, it's over the top, okay? So
A favorite vacation spot?
I love Ibiza. So I think some of you have been there, but I think relax, sun, beach, obviously.
Describe Detroit in one word.
Mojo.
All
That's
right. And for the last question, and you could take a minute, if you had the chance to give advice to your 25-year-old self, what would you say?
Keep doing what you're doing. Turned out pretty good for me, so yeah.
Let's give a big hand to Shahid Khan. And let's welcome Steve back to the stage.
Shad, I certainly don't hope you think we're a Wayne's World production, but I think we do better than that. But one quick announcement, ladies and gentlemen. If you love today's program and you want to hear it again, there's three options. Tomorrow around this time, you'll be able to listen to it on a podcast, wherever you podcast on your smartphones. You can also watch it again on Detroit Public TV and DEC's website. If you're an Xfinity customer, you'll be able to see it in the Get Local station on demand. So, Mr. Khan, thank you for choosing the Detroit Economic Club and for your commitment to Detroit. We really appreciate you being with us. Thank you. Mayor Duggan and Daniel House, thanks so much for all you do for Detroit and for your time and talent today. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming today on time, every time. This meeting is now adjourned. Thank you.